On March 14th, 2020, as COVID-19 began to sweep the globe and dominate front page news, the Ultimate Fighting Championship put on a fight in Brasilia, Brazil, featuring Kevin Lee and Charles de Bronx Oliveira. Immediately afterwards, the promotion postponed all future events as it scrambled for a way to put on cards amid a global pandemic. 8 weeks later, on May 9th, the UFC came back with an ambitious plan to put on events at its home base, the Apex in Las Vegas, and soon thereafter, Fight Island, a specially built facility in Abu Dhabi. In order to meet its obligations to its fighters, as well as its broadcast partner ESPN, the promotion announced a grueling schedule consisting of almost weekly shows through the end of the year. 33 weeks and 32 events later, we approach the finish line. The strangest year in the modern history of the sport is nearly over, and with the exception of Rising Fighting Federation pulling out all the stops for its New Year's Eve event in Japan, UFC Fight Night 183 is the last major MMA event of 2020. For a catch-all event that swelled to a whopping 16 bouts at one point, UFC Vegas 17, with its Stephen Thompson versus Jeff Neal headliner, is a surprisingly rich slate of fights with numerous top 15 fighters on the main card and mostly intelligent matchmaking all the way down. Good evening and welcome to the SureDog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 183 Thompson versus Neal. I'm your host, Ben Duffy. With me to break down the welterweight headliner as well as the rest of the currently 13-fight card is Keith Schillen. Keith is executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as a writer for SureDog.com and a host and creator of numerous shows for SureDog Radio, including, of course, the Schillen and Duffy Show. Keith, how are you this evening?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. I've got to say, putting together the little blurb to introduce tonight's card, it kind of made me rewind and think back of this whole year. Just the fact that the term Fight Island is something that only entered our collective dictionary within really the last 8 months or so. Like, think of the breakout stars that we're talking about now that, like, even you and I, who are pretty deep into this sport, couldn't have told from Adam a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them's fighting tonight, Chaos Williams. We saw Kevin Holland last week. We got Khamzat Chimaev, like, all but being crowned the next superstar. These are all people that even people in the biz, unless they were from those regions, had no idea who they were a year ago.
Yeah, perfect example of the one you mentioned, Chimaev. He was supposed to headline this card originally. Again, so to go from a guy that majority of hardcore people didn't know who he was to headlining, and he did all that. He was supposed to go against Leon Edwards, and I think he did all that while in the gap between Leon Edwards' last fight and what was going to be his next one, and to go from a guy that we were having trouble saying his name to headlining the last card of the year. People have talked about title fights already with him and the next Khabib. A couple other guys that really broke out. You mentioned Chaos Williams. Like, I wasn't that long ago, we were breaking down Chaos Williams versus Alex Morono, and I was just like, yeah, he seemed like just another guy, like nothing special, and now he's on the main card. He gets a knockout. He, probably not fighter of the year, but he definitely gets maybe breakout fighter of the year, or at least in that category. So, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Kevin Holland's year was crazy. But the thing that really jumped out to me most is when you mentioned Fight Island. Not only have we had Fight Island, we've had so many cards on it. Like, just think, we didn't even think it was even possible. Like, we thought it was a joke all along. Like, it wasn't even like, oh, can they pull this off? It was, no, Dana's joking, right? Like, he's not really getting a island exclusively for fighters. Now, the answer to that is no, he's not getting an island exclusively for fighters. So, yeah, he didn't give us, some remote island that no one's ever been to, like Lost or Gilligan's Island. No, it wasn't that. But it's still pretty incredible that he got a location in the world that was going to allow people to come in from all around the world, no questions asked, and come in, hang out in this bubble and fight.
And the funny thing is, to all appearances, Yaz Island has actually done a better job of keeping fighters and their people isolated than actual Las Vegas.
Yeah. if you take it on face value, I'm a little skeptical on that, but I don't care if we're getting fights happen, then just get them over there and let it happen.
Well,
It's come to the point. I'm sorry. It come to the point where we get so many fights canceled that I really question like, why are we coming back to Vegas? Why are we coming back? Is it simply just the financial, the travel, which I'm assuming that's the case, the travel, the hotels, the everything. That has to be the case because otherwise, why wouldn't you just do every event at Fight Island?
That's a good question. It has to be something related to expense, even if the United Arab Emirates Tourism Board, we've learned, is has footed a certain amount of the expenses. It's still got to be vastly more expensive than putting on fights in a Las Vegas facility that they already own.
Yeah, that's another point. They own it, which is a very good point. And they also want to put some shine on their own facility that they spent huge bucks on.
Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, we've got 13 fights to talk about. Shall we just jump right into this one, or you got anything else you want to get out of the way before we do?
Let's do something really fun because during the recap show just a couple days ago, we had 15 fights. Since then, we had 2 fights. We had 1 fight canceled about an hour ago. I was actually still finishing up film study on that fight when I saw you mention that the fight got canceled. We always seem to lose something from the time we're recording to when it actually goes down. I think it's been like 4 weeks in a row or something. We're recording. It's late Wednesday night. Pick one fight. Let's guess which fight will get canceled. And I know this is just purely throwing names out, at a board and kind of figure it out. But just for bragging rights, who can predict the next fight to get canceled, for whatever reason?
Okay, I'll throw one out there. I'm going to say between all the possible reasons that it might get canceled, Nchukwi versus Pickett. For one reason, obviously, COVID is something that zaps a couple fights per card. But then on top of it, you're talking about 2 guys with big weight cuts, one of which is an unprecedented weight cut. So, unless Nchukwi might show up weighing 203 pounds for a middleweight fight, and all of a sudden Antonio Arroyo has COVID and it ends up being Nchukwi versus Winn at light heavyweight or something, that's the one I'm calling.
It's funny when I asked that was the fight I had in my mind, just simply because it seems like we've been waiting for Pickett to have a debut in the UFC. All his chances on the Contender Series. So I'll kind of go the same route with the guy who's had so many fights canceled. I'm gonna go with the Karl Robertson, Dalcha Lungiambula fight, simply because one Lungiambula is dropping down a weight class, so he could make weight. But we also have had Karl Robertson miss weight. His last fight against Marvin Vettori, he missed weight by 5 pounds. So 4 pounds he missed weight by. And before that, he had 3 fights get canceled,
including one against Vettori that made Vettori go on a rampage in the hotel lobby. That's another good one. Honestly, I think we're both just hoping and wishing that it's a prelims fight that falls off because the main card is pretty tight here. So,
you know what? And last week, that kind of was the case. We lucked out on the main card. Now that hasn't been the case over this whole COVID period. It seems like we've lost more main events than I can count. But last week we actually did luck out a little bit.
Yep, and we will be hoping and praying that the same holds up for this week. And it's actually ironic that we come into this card on that segue because our currently scheduled opener is a flyweight matchup that we were originally supposed to have. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago that we were supposed to see Jimmy Flick and Cody Durden?
It was 2 weeks ago. It was one that was the Hermanson Vettori card.
Okay, perfect. It is flyweights. It is Cody Durden versus Jimmy Flick. Durden, the 29-year-old, is 0-0 with 1 draw in the UFC, having drawn with Chris Gutierrez at his promotional debut back in August. He will take on Flick, who will be making his UFC debut. He is 30 years old, 15-5 overall, and he was victorious on Dana White's Contender Series back on September 1st. Right now, Flick despite being the debuting fighter, is the slight favorite. He's sitting around minus 150, or you can get Durden around plus 130. Keith, who do you like in this one?
Well, the first thing I like is that I didn't have to do a tape study. And I would be honest, if you listened 2 weeks ago and you remember my breakdown, then just fast forward this, because I'm basically just going to go right down my notes as I did last time. I'll start with Durden. He's a member of the American Top Team Atlanta team, which seems this really growing, budding team. That's the team with the Diego Lima and Douglas Lima, the Lima brothers. Also, I know Tony Martin's that team. That's just seem having a lot of success. He's a high-paced fighter. I haven't seen much of his boxing, and what I've seen, it doesn't look pretty. Though he does have pretty good kick game, hard leg kicks. He does check leg kicks, which is kind of a rarity when I do my breakdowns. Solid wrestler. He was a 2-time Georgia high school wrestling state champion. Good back takes. He had Chris Gutierrez back in the very beginning of their fight in his UFC debut. Even got a 10-8 round by most people's scorecard, which is the reason why it ended up being a draw. Solid ground and pound. I am a little worried about his submission defense, though, because he was almost submitted by Chris Gutierrez in their fight. And he also has 2 losses by submission. Now, that doesn't really go good with a guy like Flick. Now, Flick this is making his UFC debut, Contender Series guy. He faced some really good competition to get in the UFC, plus the Contender Series win. He's not a great athlete, but he kind of makes up for by being unorthodox, which I like. He has similar stand-up to Durden, where he's not much of a threat with his hands. He kind of defensively, he just kind of covers up, doesn't really have much head movement. But he throws a lot of good kicks, and he also checks kicks, which is really rare to have not only have one fighter who checks kicks in a fight, but actually have 2 fighters. He's an okay wrestler, decent entries on the hips, though he sometimes can shoot from too far away, doesn't really set it up. But he was willing to just grind and be relentless and kind of grind you against the cage. And if he gets you to the ground, he is a legit submission threat. And he's one of those fun, like Tony Ferguson type, or even like a Charles Oliveira type. Now, I'm not saying he's Charles Oliveira, who's most decorated submission artist in the UFC, or at least the most submission wins. But I mean it in the way that he gets him in scrambles. He's just fun. He'll look for everything. One of his specialties is a Von Flue choke, which would be cool to add another guy to get that submission. In his Contender Series match against Nate Smith, who's a Olympic level wrestler, a guy that was trying out for the Olympics, he ran a gauntlet on Nate Smith. And my one concern with his jiu-jitsu, though, is that he'll sometimes, when he's in a bad position, he'll just look for submissions instead of scrambling, and you know how much I don't like that. This could be a really ugly affair if it stays standing, but if it goes to the ground, I think Flick will have his way, and I think Durden will make the bad habit of going to his wrestling in a fight that I don't think it'll favor him hits the ground. I think Flick is too slick on the mat. These guys have kind of bickered a little bit on social media, which is kind of increased my interest in the fight. Like I'm not like Marcel Dorff, who doesn't need any trash talk. He doesn't like trash talk. I love trash talk. If you want to add trash talk, it makes me more excited. I think Flick just runs submission onto Durden before he finally secures one, and he gets a 2nd round submission.
Beautiful. I likewise feel about the same about this as I did a couple weeks ago. Durden is a big physical flyweight, and for the most part, being a big physical guy works to your advantage, but it will probably work against him here. He showed gas tank issues against Gutierrez. Obviously, I gave him a 10-8 first round as well. He was completely dominant and was really sucking wind by the end of that fight. 125 is not a division that rewards people that don't have 3 rounds of gas. And I agree. I think this is going to end up being the tired wrestler thing, where Durden will probably win the first round. I don't know who'll win the second round, but by the 3rd round, he's going to be tired. And a tired wrestler shooting is a sitting duck for someone like Jimmy Flick. Give me Flick by 3rd round submission. Next up, we move to the middleweight division, possibly, hopefully, as Tafon Nchukwi takes on Jamie Pickett. Nchukwi, the 26-year-old Cameroonian, is 4-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is making his UFC debut after a win via sensational head kick on Dana White's Contender Series back in September. He is taking on Pickett, who is also making his UFC debut out of the Contender Series. Pickett is 32 years old. He is 11-4 overall. He is, I don't know if he's the only one anymore, but I believe he was the first 3-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. Right now, Nchukwi is the substantial favorite, sitting around minus 290, where you can get Pickett as high as plus 240, plus 245. Really, the only suspense to me here is whether Nchukwi will be able to make the middleweight limit. He competed at light heavyweights on the Contender Series. He has competed at heavyweight in his career. He's not a super tall guy, but he is thick. He's just broad-shouldered, muscular, like barrel-chested guy. I mean, he had a little weight to lose at heavyweight, but he was not a particularly fat light heavyweight. So that's really the only suspense for me. If he makes the weight, if he steps on that scale at 186 or close enough to it that Pickett takes the fight, I think this is all Nchukwi. He is just a classic slugger. He has a head kick, a win on his record, but I mean, I think of him as a puncher in the fights of his I've seen before. He will throw kicks, but he is a puncher. He wants to come forward. He wants to throw, particularly the right hand, just until you're dead. I don't know if he has the footwork or the hand speed to make that work at a high level in the UFC. I don't know if either of these guys is long-term UFC material, but again, assuming he makes the weight and he's not completely dead, I think Pickett is completely dead. I've seen Pickett 3 times on the Contender Series now. 3rd time was the charm, but this is a tough ask for him. I don't think Pickett does anything well enough to throw Nchukwi off of what he wants to do. Give me Nchukwi by first round knockout.
All right, so just to bring up, you said Pickett having 3 Contender Series. I know Dontel Mays had 3 Contender Series appearances too. I think he actually was the first to make 3. There might be someone else, but
I forgot about Mays. Thank you.
Yeah, there might be other ones. That was just off the top of my head. So these are Contender Series alumni, but they've taken really different paths, as you mentioned. Like Pickett has almost as many fights on the Contender Series than Nchukwi has fights in general. Though I kind of pride myself in my knowledge of the Contender Series, it's hard to get a really good grasp on Nchukwi because he's 4-0 and he has very quick knockouts. If you could add up all his time, it's under 15 minutes of film. He's a Lord Irvin guy, so I don't really know how I feel about that. Like, yet, as you mentioned, he's moving down from middleweight when he used to be a heavyweight, and I don't know how because this guy has tons of muscle. He's got a big frame, big chest. He's short but stocky, very similar to his former opponent. William Knight is one of these guys that more horizontal than vertical. But as you already mentioned, this guy has crushing power. He's got big hands. He throws absolute hammers. Though he's athletic enough to kind of throw in a spinning attack, which he likes. He has that, highlight reel, high kick, knockout. But the best that I've seen, it might be his clinch striking. He does very well in that space to kind of frame up, use his muscle to kind of push his opponent's head back, and then just unload big shots against the cage. He does have solid takedown defense, though I haven't seen much of offensive wrestling. Though, and the other thing, though he got that high kick knockout, he was starting to slow down in that fighting Contender Series, and that was only the very beginning of the second round, which is obviously troublesome. Moving over to Pickett. Pickett's definitely the more well-rounded fighter of the two, but definitely not the same ceiling. He looks like a regional fighter to me, or a very low-level UFC fighter. His hands are pretty fast. He likes to press the action, constantly moving forward. He's got some sting in his strikes, but he's not a one-punch quitter. Hit him and quit him like Nchukwi is. He uses some stance switches. He throws occasional flying knee, which he hasn't been that effective with. I don't like that he does not have any kicks in his arsenal. He's mostly a boxer and doesn't check any kicks. he has good head movement, but because he comes forward so much, he gets cracked fairly easy. He wants to lead the dance where he doesn't really like being pressured to fight off his back foot. And one of his contender series fights was against Puna Soriano. He struggled with the power of Puna Soriano. He really didn't like that. I said he's well-rounded because he's probably an even better grappler than he is a striker. I like his chain wrestling. Like he will change, one takedown to another one. If he gets on top, pretty solid ground and pound. I would say he's a submission threat, even though he only has one submission on record. He more attempts submissions, I should say. He'll lose position, sometimes going for that submission, which is troublesome. And if he ends up bottom, he really struggles to get up. Now, like I said, I haven't seen much in Nchukwi on top, but that just seems like a very scary thing if he is. If Pickett can survive an early storm, he could tire out Nchukwi and beat him just simply on volume. I don't think he will, though. I think one or two options will happen. I think he'll either respect Nchukwi's power too much and then fight a completely different style than he's used to and not really throw the volume he needs to win, or he'll not change his style at all, come forward and just get cracked or something. I'm gonna guess it's the latter, and I'm gonna take Nchukwi by first round TKO. And it's so funny. I say that this seems like a real fight. When I said first round TKO, I almost added in, and I think he gets a UFC contract.
Well, it sounds like he'll keep it at least for one more fight. There you have it. Unanimous first round knockout picks for Tafon Nchukwi. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 183 prelims, we have a bantamweight attraction between Aiemann Zahabi and Drako Rodriguez. Zahabi, 33 years old, 7-2 in his mixed martial arts career, 1-2 in the UFC. He is, of course, the younger brother of TriStar Gym head honcho Firas Zahabi. He'll be taking on the debuting Rodriguez. Drako Rodriguez is 24 years old. He appeared on Dana White's Contender Series back in September, where he notched a very quick, very decisive triangle choke technical submission of Houston's own Leomana Martinez, choking him all the way out. Right now, Rodriguez is a moderate favorite, sitting around minus 185. If you like the younger Zahabi, you can get him around plus 155 or plus 160. How do you see this one breaking down, Keith?
Well, I'll start with Zahabi. It's really hard to just understand what you're going to get with him. As you mentioned, he's been so inactive, fighting just 2 times in 3 years. When he does fight, he kind of fights in bursts, following boxing, like kind of in short little like attack with some boxing and then back out. His boxing is pretty solid, though. He's a TriStar guy, which means he's going to work behind a jab, your basic 1-2 combinations that really stick to the basics kind of guy. Some of the flaws in his boxing is, though he has some decent, I don't want to say he has a lot of power, but he did land some power shots against Ricardo Ramos where, snapped his head back pretty good. He's got nothing special. He's not going to knock you out with one big shot. He can lack volume at times, looking to land just one strike at a time, which is definitely not good in the lower weight classes. He lacks head movement. Kicks are pretty good, but he doesn't throw them enough. He hasn't made kicking a bigger part of his game, which I kind of wish he would. He also doesn't check leg kicks. Solid in the clinch. Will get a takedown. He'll look for takedowns, which I definitely think it opens up his boxing more. Though he isn't a powerful wrestler. Chances are, if you have a good takedown defense, he's not going to power through your hips. And he's been taken down himself. He's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think he's a brown belt. Last time on the broadcasted brown belt, he might be a black belt by now, being that was like 3 years ago. He's pretty good in scrambles. He is a submission threat. So I don't hate Aiemann Zahabi. Like, there's definitely areas of growth. I think actually being a TriStar probably holds him back more because they're so conservative in their style that he needs a more open, more aggressive style to his game. Drako Rodriguez, he's like the complete opposite. This guy's fun. He has fun when he's fighting. He smiles. He sticks out his tongue. It's going to be very different than like a very reserved Zahabi. He's got some pro boxing experience, but he's not a technical striker. He's very aggressive to the point where he gets wild. He likes the pressure, doesn't really like being forced back on his back foot, which I don't know why I say that. I don't know many fighters that do. Solid wrestler. Most of his takedowns come from the body lock. Pretty good in scrambles. Good ground and pound if he's on top. Though he is a weak defensive wrestler, and he makes it worse by jumping on the guillotine. Now, I'm taking Rodriguez simply because he has been more active, so I feel a little more confident in that. I also think he has more power. I think he has the better offensive wrestling, definitely looks for the offensive wrestling more. I don't think he'll stop Zahabi, though, because Zahabi, I don't think he's going to stop Zahabi. So I'm going to take Rodriguez by decision in a close. I think it'll be a close affair.
Excellent. I feel a lot of what you're putting down there. Zahabi, to me, in his 3 UFC fights, for a guy who seems to be a pretty big framed bantamweight, he's just not a terribly physical guy. I feel like he's kind of been pushed around, and he's been pushed around by not that great UFC bantamweights. Like Vince Morales and Ricardo Ramos are his last 2 fights, and I didn't feel as though he was the stronger or more physical guy in either of those fights. That's something that Rodriguez will definitely put to the test. This one would be a lot of fun if I knew it was going to be primarily grappling, but this may be one of the ones that plays out as a mediocre kickboxing match for at least 2 out of 3 rounds. I'm with you in that I don't see Zahabi getting finished here. I mean, he's been finished once in his career, and it was just a fantastic picture-perfect spinning back elbow in a fight that otherwise he was doing pretty well. I thought he was 1-1 against Ramos and probably on his way to winning the 3rd round until he got completely flatlined. I don't think Rodriguez has that in his repertoire. If he does and he lands it on Zahabi, then I guess I'm wrong. But I see Rodriguez winning a decision here, primarily in kind of a slow-paced kickboxing match, as slow-paced as Zahabi could make it. I think Rodriguez will come at him, and Zahabi, very TriStar-like, will use good footwork, use his jab to just kind of, slow things down and keep it pretty safe for most of the fight. But yeah, give me Rodriguez by decision.
Yeah, can I just real quick, because there's some things you said that I really like. You mentioned his last 2 fights, Ricardo Ramos and Vince Morales. I'm surprised, even though we all remember the finish in the Ramos face where he got spinning back elbowed. It's funny because I actually thought Zahabi did better in that fight than he did against Vince Morales. Ramos is a better fighter than Vince Morales, which is really surprising that he was like doing okay in that fight, which makes it even more frustrating. Like he's almost like he's going the wrong direction. And then you have these huge moments of inactivity. But to say all that, I still think Drako Rodriguez should not be a 2-1 favorite over anybody in the UFC.
Certainly not right now. Like we haven't seen enough from him, and you're right. And Zahabi, I mean, he's headed in the direction that basically, I mean, we're about to talk about Jose Aldo later, but every human bantamweight is headed as they get further into their 30s. There's no way he's gotten better with 18 months off between fights as he moves into his mid 30s. So, like we may already have seen the best of the guy. I guess we'll see. Next up, we have a catchweight fight at 195 pounds as Deron Winn takes on Antonio Arroyo. Winn, the 31-year-old, is 6-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 1-2 in the UFC. He'll be taking on the Brazilian Arroyo, who typically plies his trade at middleweight, but is moving up to 195 for this one-off fight. He is 9-3 in his professional career. He is 0-1 in the UFC, having made his debut all the way back last November and lost a unanimous decision to Andre Muniz after 2 appearances on Dana White's Contender Series, one on the Brazil version and then one on the flagship version. Currently, Arroyo is a slight favorite. You can get him around -155, while Winn is out there at +130, +135. First thing I'll say about this one is that and you exclaimed this right before we started recording as we were talking about the fight. I don't know what Winn is doing here. I know that he is a protege of Daniel Cormier, but I hope he doesn't look at Daniel Cormier having success as just an impossibly short, like 5'10", 5'11" heavyweight, and think that he can do something similar as a 5'7" light heavyweight. I don't know, and I'll get to my prediction for this fight, but I don't know for sure who's going to win this fight, but I know that win or lose, Deron Winn does not have a future in the UFC as a light heavyweight. I don't know what he's doing at 195 pounds here, because if he can't make 185, then this is all academic. And it's gonna be real obvious once they get into the cage, because the jury is still out on Arroyo's skill level, but he is a big dude. He is not a small-bodied middleweight, and he is going to absolutely dwarf Winn out there. Winn, obviously, his strength, the thing that stirs the drink, what drives the rest of his game is his wrestling. High-level wrestler, but in 3 UFC fights, he's lost badly to Gerald Meerschaert, lost badly to Darren Stewart, and he beat Rhode Island's finest, Eric Spicely, in a fight that, honestly, Spicely, I don't know if I gave the fight to Spicely, but he was certainly coming on at the end. Like, Spicely gave Deron Winn way more trouble than he should have. If Winn wants to live, he needs to get this fight to the ground. Arroyo doesn't have incredible takedown defense, but he is a hard kicker, and he leans on those kicks. He likes to throw kicks to the legs and to the body, and I think he's going to be pretty fearless with that. I don't think Winn's going to be able to put him off that part of his game. Like, I think Winn will probably try to, crash the pocket when he starts kicking, or just, catch a kick and take him down. But I think Arroyo, especially a non-depleted 195-pound Arroyo, is just going to be big, strong enough, explosive enough to either fight off the takedowns or get back up. Winn is not a fantastic finisher, at least at the UFC or near UFC level, once he gets someone down. So, I mean, if he does get Arroyo down, I see Arroyo either sweeping, escaping, or just surviving until it gets stood back up. Like, I can't see Deron Winn, pounding Arroyo out down there or getting a sub. Like, give me Arroyo by, I'm going to say round 3 knockout. Just catches Winn with a knee or a kick, wins the more tired of the two guys and just puts him away.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing that you said, and that was that Eric Spicely is Rhode Island's finest. I thought I was Rhode Island's finest, but so all jokes aside, I think these guys might be battling for their job. Like, the loser could be getting cut from the UFC. I'll start with Winn. I agree with every single thing you said. He's 5'6", fighting at a catchweight fight. Technically speaking, it's basically like a light heavyweight fight. If you weigh 195 at light heavyweight, you can fight a light heavyweight. You want to compare that to Jose Aldo, who's a bantamweight, who's 5'7". Jose Aldo is taller than Deron Winn, and there's 4 throwing the catchweight. They're 4.5 weight classes difference.
Both Flick and Durden are taller than Winn,
yeah.
and they're
flyweights. Oh,
yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that Winn is a good pocket boxer. I will say he has power in the pocket. I don't know if he's a good pocket boxer when we've only seen it be successful against Eric Spicely, who's not known for his striking, and actually has some really good success against Deron Winn. And the biggest reason why I think he could be a good pocket boxer if he can get there, but he struggles due to his lack of range and being, almost a foot shorter than his opponents at times. I really hate the DC. I know you didn't do it, but a lot of people do that DC comparison. I just think it's lazy. I get it. They're teammates. DC's kind of taught them. They coach the wrestling together. They're very similar. Background, the physique. But DC is the exception to the rule of the short guy who can dominate. He's not like the example. Or yeah, that's, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but yeah, he's not the guy you want to follow. Deron Winn should be fighting at welterweight where he still would be short. I also think when you talk about their skills, yeah, they're both wrestlers. And if you want to say that he has a similar wrestling to DC, absolutely. But striking, no way. And one of the biggest things about Deron Winn is his lack of head movement. One of the best things about DC is his head movement, especially like his pulls. He does that leaning pulls where he kind of pulls and he rocks back into his power, especially at heavyweight. Like Winn doesn't do that. Winn is solid in the clinch, but even there he has issues because being so short he's open to knees. You can't take anything away from his wrestling. Like that's good where he's going to go to, and he's not just a good wrestler; he's a great wrestler. He's an elite wrestler. He's chain wrestled together. He's very good at like slide bys and stuff like that. He can get body lock takedowns, and he knows that he needs to get the fight to the ground, so he looks to close immediately. But cardio is also a major issue for Winn. You mentioned him losing to Mercer. One of the big reasons why he lost to Mercer because he gassed out. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why he lost to Stewart, though, I am going to disagree with you. I think you said he lost bad to Stewart. I actually thought he should have got the win against Stewart. But it's one of those ones, like I looked at MMA decisions, and I think there was 12 media members. It was 6-6. But why was it close? Because he gassed out. And Stewart won the third round, despite getting taken down multiple times. I'll move over to Arroyo. Not only is he, if this was a middleweight matchup, going up to 185, he's a huge middleweight.
Yep.
I mean, he missed weight for his last fight, or I think he actually made weight, but they had to be hospitalized afterwards. But he's going to have a 9-inch height advantage on Winn. He's a southpaw, as you mentioned. He switches stance a lot, does attack from different angles. Pretty light on his feet, but he's light to get to where he wants to be, and then he becomes a brawler, and he throws hard. He throws hard hooks in every exchange, has KO power, and as you mentioned, his kicks are just dangerous, especially his body kick that has dropped guys on the regional scene. He does like spinning attacks. He's exciting. He can sneaking a takedown himself with his entries or inside the clinch. In fact, Andre Munoz went to attack him, and he threw Andre Munoz at the beginning of their fight. He's not much of a top side threat. He actually has cardio issues himself, and when he gets on top, he likes to stall. He likes to catch his breath when he's wrestling. If he's on bottom, though, I'll give him credit. He's hard to submit. Like Munoz had his chances to submit him and couldn't, which would be really surprising if Winn could. Now, Winn might be able to just get him down and blast him, sure, but he probably won't submit him. And cardio is also an issue, as that fight was pretty close with the Muniz until Arroyo kind of faded late. As crazy as it sounds, as I said, like a lot of good things about Arroyo, said not many things good about Winn. I flip-flopped out of the fight. It was a hard one pick simply because Winn is going to have such an advantage in the wrestling department where he's going to get takedowns. However, I think Arroyo will do enough, especially as the fight goes on, to land on the feet with that advantage, that reach advantage. And I think he wins a sloppy kind of that's similar to the Darren Stu fight, where we kind of got sloppy with both guys getting tired. And I think he not only beats Darren Winn, I think he puts him out of the UFC, as Darren Winn is one of the guys who gets cut.
Yeah, you made a good point there in that, like the UFC, obviously they don't love losing, but I mean, they have even less tolerance for missing weight than for losing. And if you lose a fight that's in a catch weight that was basically made expressly as a concession to you, that's basically the same as missing weight. So, yeah.
The other thing, it bothers me more about Winn fighting at this catch weight than Munoz. Like, Munoz might want to just move up to 205. He's a guy that depends on power, throws hard. Like, that might just be better for him. But you hear Winn's coaches, teammates, they talk about him should be a welterweight. And he still has a desire to fight up. Like, to me, he's not following his coaches. I wonder where his heart is, how committed he is. It's definitely concerning to me. And like, I want him to be successful. Like anytime a fighter comes in with high expectations, I kind of want them to be successful. Also, when they have high expectations in the shadow of people that they should never be in the shadow of, like he is with DC. Like
Sure.
he not only was he an All-American wrestler and all that, which always gives you high expectations to be. When he came in the UFC, I think DC was like the two-weight champion
Mm-hmm.
and top 5, top 10, however you want to rank him, fighter of all time. And like a fan favorite, there's a commentary. DC might be commentating his fights. I know he did the one in Boston. I want to be wrong about this fight. Like I want him to win. We'll see.
Yeah, you and I both have a soft spot for the high-level wrestlers that come in, I know. Moving along in the UFC Vegas 17 prelims, we have yet another fight that is likely to bring us some suspense on the weigh-in scale before the fight even happens, as Karl Baby K Robertson takes on Dalcha Lungiambula. Robertson, the 30-year-old, is 9-3 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 4-3 in the UFC since joining off of the original season of Dana White's Contender Series back in 2017. He's taking on Lungiambula. The 35-year-old from South Africa will be making his middleweight debut, fingers crossed, knock on wood, after having competed at 205 pounds in the UFC. Lungiambula is 10-2 overall. He's 1-1 in the UFC. He won his debut last June against Thompson, pounding his man out on the ground in the third round. He then fell victim to one of the highlight reel knockouts of 2019 as Magomed Ankalaev, who was already winning the fight handily, completely iced him with a front kick to the jaw 30 seconds into the final round of their fight back at UFC Fight Night 163. Robertson is the substantial favorite here. Around minus 250, minus 260. Lungiambula, you can get around plus 220. I said this about the other fight where Nchukwi was the one who was going to be fighting at 185 pounds for the first time after having fought at 205 and even heavyweight. Here's another one where a lot of how this fight turns out for me will depend on how successful Dalcha Lungiambula is in making 185 pounds. But here I actually feel the same way about Karl Roberson. He missed weight for his last fight badly. He missed it by, I believe, 5 or 6 pounds. And then just got absolutely trucked by Marvin Vettori. And that was after having to bow out of his first scheduled fight with Vettori, which from the kind of the sound of what came out of him in his camp sounded as though it might have been a mishap to do with his weight cut. The specific things he was saying about how he felt and what he had to do sounded like it might have been a blown weight cut that time as well. So this sounds like something that maybe Robertson is having a harder time getting a handle on, either just during the year of COVID where everybody's training has been tossed up into the air, or just as he goes into his 30s as a very big framed middleweight. But assuming that either neither of these guys blows weight or they both blow it by the same amount and we just have a catch weight, I would favor Robertson anyway, though I can't say I would favor him by 2.5 to 1. Robertson, good. He's a very good striker, good kickboxer, tons of power in his punches as well as his kicks, and has a pretty good opportunistic offensive wrestling game as well. His defensive wrestling is no great shakes. It mostly consists of just kind of using his power to shove the guy's head down and kind of hop back to the cage and fight that way. It's not a traditional like sprawl game. But I don't think Lungiambula is going to try to take him down anyway. I think we're going to have just a wild brawl of a kickboxing match until one guy falls down here. And in a fight like that, I'm going to take Robertson. Even though he's not the one coming down in weight, he is the taller guy. He's going to have a reach advantage. He's pretty good at keeping his chin off the gunnery range, where Lungiambula demonstrably is not, because Ankalaev had been handling him even before the highlight reel knockout. So I like Karl Robertson like pretty decidedly in this one. Still think the odds are strange, just given how bad he looked in his last fight and the fact that he's had some weight cut issues. But give me Karl Robertson via second round knockout.
Yeah, so Karl Robertson, you mentioned about him missing weight, and he might be a guy who's also like 205 might make more sense to him. He's a speed guy moving up. He'd have even more speed, and also like the champion in that division. And I know it's weird to jump from fighting Dalcha Lungiambula to talking about the champion, but the champion in that division is a better stylistic matchup for him than Israel Adesanya is in his division is right now. Obviously, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about Robertson. One thing we have to mention, though, we talked about him looking bad in his last fight. It was to Marvin Vettori, which that loss doesn't look too bad on your record right now, being how Vettori looked sensational 2 weeks ago. I just mentioned about Robertson. He's a very athletic guy. He's a great striker. Southpaw, nice power in his hands, fast hands. I love his head movement. He has a very slip and rip style, which I've talked before. Like that's like my favorite style of striking. He does, if he's not slipping with his head, he's parrying his punches, parrying what's coming forward and countering that. Great leg kicks, very fast high kick. I actually think he's a better grappler than he gets credit for. I mean, he has 4 submission wins on his record. He's got a pretty good scrambling game. Though, like, if you look on, the Sherdog Fight Finder and you look, or Wikipedia, wherever you want, and you look and you see his loss to Marvin Vettori and, he gets taken on the first round, that don't look good. But, like, there was some fun scrambles in that fight. Like, he had when he ran up the cage to escape, and he had, like, some escapes in that match against Vettori, which was insane. One issue, though, is cardio's an issue. We've seen him slow down in fights. Move over to, and I might be butchering this guy's name. I apologize. I believe it's Lungiambula, if I'm saying that correctly. This guy, he's already 35, and he's such a wild card because, he's just, at 35 years old, he's just come in the UFC. Obviously, he's moving down a weight class. He's explosive. He has huge power. I mean, he dropped Ankalaev in his last fight. It was briefly, but did grab him. And Ankalaev actually mentioned it in the post fight that he caught him with something. So he's explosive. He has some huge power, though he's not that technical on the feet, and that comes from a guy who kind of got a late start. He also parries his punches. I like that, but he also backs straight up when he's getting pressured, which is not good because a good striker, someone like Karl Robertson, is going to catch him with that. He also loads up on everything, trying to knock you out with one punch. He does conserve some of his energy because he doesn't have a high output because he's always looking for the one big shot. He should want to get this fight to the clinch because when he gets in the fight, he's obviously strong there. He's a judo black belt. He has trips. He has throws. He has solid takedown defense. Like Ankalaev struggled to get him down, but if he does get taken down, he struggles to get back up the feet. And one reason why I believe he struggles to get back on his feet is because of the judo background. Because if you understand the rules of judo, there's not a lot of ground fighting. It's like you have 15 minutes to either get a submission, move to a better position, or not 15 minutes, 15 seconds or so, and then they stand you back up. That's why, like going back to Ronda Rousey's days, Ronda would jump to a submission even in a bad position because you don't lose points for going for attempts, and also if you miss, you get put right back to your feet shortly after. Which is why I think he struggles to get up because it's not really stressed in judo to try to escape like it is in like folk style wrestling. It has much more of a freestyle, if you're familiar with the rules of freestyle wrestling, than it is the folk style where you actually get points for getting escapes. But another big thing is he started slowing down in the Ankalaev fight. So as a prediction, if Lungiambula can get to the clinch, he could get a takedown and he could win. However, if he keeps standing, I really like Robertson to match his speed, to match his power, and also just have way more weapons and more technique. So I think Robertson catches him. I think he catches him something big. I'm still a Robertson fan, though he, as you mentioned, he hasn't looked great lately, but I think this might be just a perfect stylist matchup. I think he knocks out Lungiambula. I'm going to say But I think both guys are going to have their moments, and I think both guys are going to be excited with their power. I think it's going to be a little bit of back and forth affair, and that's why I'm actually not only taking Robertson by second round knockout, but I'm actually locking this in as my fight of the night candidate. So for those keeping track, this is my fight of the night, as I think it's going to be a fun stand-up affair.
We now head to the women's bantamweight division, where we have a matchup between Sijara Eubanks and Pannie Kianzad. Eubanks, the 35-year-old, is 6-5 as a mixed martial artist. She is 4-3 in the UFC. She'll be taking on Kianzad, who is 29 years old, 13-5 in her professional career, 2-2 in the UFC across two different stints with the promotion since appearing on The Ultimate Fighter Season 28. Eubanks, the slight favorite, minus 160. Kianzad right now hovering around plus 140. How do you see this one playing out, Keith Schillen?
So this is an interesting matchup. I'll start with Eubanks, for multi-time former title challenger who actually never fought for the title. She just frustrates me. She frustrates me because there's glimpses of greatness in her. Like, you see it every once in a while, and you're like, oh, that's why we got excited and that we thought maybe she'd hold a title one day. And then she loses to Betchko. And you're like, oh, no, she kind of sucks. And then you realize, oh, she's 6-5. You just never know what you're going to get with her. She's a former strawweight, so she's a little undersized for bantamweight. She lacks power due to that. She can be overpowered in the clinch due to her size disadvantage. We saw that in the Aiemann Ladd fight. But she can sometimes, like I said, with glimpses, you see the good things. She's light on her feet. She can use her footwork to slide into the pocket, where she's a pretty good pocket boxer. She has a great overhand right, and her left hook is probably her best strike. Now, that overhand right she looks for probably too often. She gets very right-hand happy, kind of like a Dan Henderson thing, without the crushing Michael Bisping out cold with it. She can sneak in a high kick. I like that. She kind of throws it when she'll slide in the pocket, and when her opponent's backing away, she'll kind of throw it, almost tries to time the extension of her leg as her opponent backs up, which is kind of sneaky. Good takedowns, nice top control. I think she gets overcredited, though, with how much of a submission threat. Like, they always talk about how great of a submission threat, and like, she's got one submission in her career, and it was on the Tough Show. So really, technically, on her record, she doesn't have a submission win. I believe that. Now I'm actually kind of questioning myself if maybe it was tough and another. But regardless, she's not as good of a submission threat as she gets credit for. And despite her getting mad in post-fight interviews, she does slow down in fights, especially the Betchko fight, even though she flipped out about saying, no, I don't gas out. Moving to Pannie Kianzad. So before I watched film, I expected this would be one of my most confident picks in Sijara Eubanks. And then I started watching. I was like, wow, Kianzad's actually better than I remember. Obviously, she's a veteran fighter. She's the opposite of Sijara Eubanks, where she's big for the weight class because she's a former featherweight. Good boxing, high output, constantly moving forward, pretty fast, nice snap on her punches. I like that she stays very tight, works behind a jab, adds in low kicks into her combinations. However, defensively, she has them all. She's very hittable because she keeps her head on the center line. She can grind in the clinch a little bit, though she's a weak defensive wrestler and really struggles to get off from the bottom. I mean, Betchko was having success holding her down. So as a prediction, bad Eubanks loses to Kianzad. Good Eubanks probably beats her. So who shows up? Maybe the person in the middle. So I think it's going to be a close fight. I'm going to guess that Eubanks can get a few takedowns and sneaks out a very close decision. Pre-tape set, so I always do this. I mentioned before I even break down film, I always write down who I'm going to pick. I write down my upset, I write down my lock, everything, and then I always want to see if tape study changes me. This was going to be my lock pick of the night. And then after the tape started, I'm like, actually, I'm going to take Eubanks by split decision. So it definitely had a big change.
Awesome. I look at these two and I see a lot of the same dynamic that you do. I agree that Eubanks is not this venomous, submission threat that the UFC booth sometimes makes her out to be. And you are correct that she doesn't technically officially have any submission wins on her record. But she did submit Alexa Connors with a key lock.
Who?
No, sorry. No, she submitted Maya Stevenson with a Kimura on the Ultimate Fighter 26. She is, however, considering that she's small for the division, especially height challenged for the division, a pretty good takedown artist, and much more of kind of a positional top control, throw a little bit of ground and pound ground fighter, at least at the UFC level. I think that's actually going to work on Kianzad. You look at Kianzad's record in the UFC, and it's pretty easy to just split it down the middle by the big physical women beat her pretty easily, and she beat the less big, less physical women pretty easily. Even though Eubanks is not big, she is physical. And while I like Kianzad as a striker, all the things that she does well, she doesn't do quite as well when somebody's coming straight at her and walking her down. That seems to bring her worst tendencies out. And that is something that, if nothing else, Eubanks is good for as a striker. She is good for coming forward and throwing offense, especially in the first round and a half or so. So I have Eubanks in this one as well. I think just through a combination of either outlanding Kianzad with volume, not giving her enough room to uncork some of her kicks, and possibly just taking her down and keeping her down and doing enough damage to spend time there, she'll win the first and second rounds that way and probably lose the third as she gasses out and Kianzad doesn't. But also give me Eubanks by decision in this one. With that, we come to the featured prelim of UFC Vegas 17, a 170-pound matchup between former lightweight champion Anthony Pettis and Alex Morono. Pettis, the 33-year-old, is 23-10 in his professional career, 10-9 in the UFC. He'll be taking on Morono. The 30-year-old is 18-6 with one no contest. Overall, 7-3 with one no contest in the UFC. Pettis is a substantial favorite right now, sitting around minus 225, minus 230. Morono, you can get as high as plus 195. Before we even dig into this, we were talking before we started recording tonight about how strange this matchup is, period. I mean, Anthony Pettis, he certainly is not in the form he was in, say, 2013, 2014, when he was perhaps the most breathtaking offensive fighter in all of mixed martial arts at any weight class. But he's not exactly fallen all the way through the floor either. Since moving up to welterweight, he is, and not permanently, but since he gave it a shot, he is 3-3 in his last 6 fights, taking on basically all top 15 level fighters across 2 of the toughest weight classes in the sport. He's fought Michael Chiesa, Tony Ferguson, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Nate Diaz, Diego Ferreira, and most recently Donald Cerrone. So again, it's not as though he's a complete non-factor in the cage. He's still competitive with some of the best fighters in the world. And most notably, he won his last fight. He beat Donald Cerrone in May. It is rare that you get a former champ like Pettis, who is still one of the bigger names in the UFC. He's still on the short list, taking a step down to a lesser known name, but a high risk, low reward fight for himself. On the flip side, for Morono, it's a fantastic opportunity because welterweight is possibly the hardest division in the sport. Well, it's the hardest division in the sport to actually break into the top 10. We've had fighters who won 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in a row welterweight just to be able to grab the bottom of that ladder. But it is also one of the hardest divisions for a non-name fighter, which, all apologies to Alex for saying that, but relative to Pettis, it is hard for a lesser known fighter to get a fight with one of the big names. So I don't understand exactly why this is happening. Maybe Pettis is coming up on the end of his contract, as you speculated, and the UFC is just trying to skewer him with a high-risk, low-reward fight. Maybe Pettis asked for this because he wanted one more big paycheck before Christmas. I don't know why. I'm sure Morono leaped to take it because I live local to Alex Morono. I know him in person. We talked, kind of half chat, half interview after he beat Reese McKee back in November, and he told me, he's like, I'm still getting things back in line with my own gym. Kind of getting classes back going again. I want to fight in March or April. He was like, I've already got 11 Reebok fight kits. I want to fight just, I want to be the first weekend that they're doing the Venom fight kits in the spring. A week later, he takes this fight. So I'm sure he sees it as a fantastic opportunity for himself. But, I mean, were you surprised when this one was announced?
Yeah, it was one of the most head-scratcher ones in history because it would make more sense if Pettis is coming off a loss and you're like, all right, we want him to rebound against this guy. It would make more sense if Morono wasn't, a big name, which he isn't, but it's a guy that the hardcore fans are excited about in the future. Like, he's not even that, where you're trying to get one over. I feel like if Alex Morono, when he got the contract from his manager, he must have been like, oh, there's a mistake on it. It says Anthony Pettis. You mean Anthony Rocco Martin. Or when he texted him, you meant Anthony Martin, not Anthony Pettis. And no, we mean Anthony Pettis. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Anthony Pettis was in a matchup against Nate Diaz in one of the biggest matches in UFC. I mean, the heavyweight title fight was on the line with two of the greatest fighters of all time, and it was Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis was getting more press. Fast forward 3 fights later, and he's on the prelims of a fight night against a guy on a 1-fight winning streak. I don't get it. It's all risk, no reward for Anthony Pettis. It's all reward, no risk for Alex Morono. Besides getting his butt kicked, but there's no risk. And I'm not saying he's going to get his butt kicked. We're not giving his prediction, but you know what I'm saying. It's a head scratcher.
It's a head scratcher. I'll go ahead and go first here. The book is out on Alex Morono as a fighter. He's not a spectacular fast twitch athlete, especially by the standards of the welterweight division. Very aggressive. He's a good striker. He throws a variety of strikes. Offensively, I think he's a very good striker. Interestingly, for a guy that owns a Gracie Barra Academy, he hates the fight to go to the ground. His philosophy is, I want to strike with you because knockouts are what I want to see, and I'm just going to strike until you decide you want it to go to the ground. His liability is that he's hittable. He's the guy that introduced the world to Chaos Williams, back in one of the last cards before COVID-19 turned the world upside down, and that took all of 27 seconds. And he lost that fight by getting drawn into a wild brawl early on. He himself was like, yeah, I planted and started throwing before really establishing range because I just wanted to get this dude out of there. And next thing I knew, he was TKO'd. Pettis is still the type of guy that can take advantage of that. As I said earlier, he's not just the Quicksilver sniper he was in 2014 when he wiped out Joe Lozon, Donald Cerrone, Benson Henderson, and Gilbert Melendez in a row just with breathtaking striking and grappling. But he's still a guy that is a pretty he's still a sniper, just a slower sniper. And because of that, he certainly could take advantage of Morono's defensive lapses. It helps Morono that his primary training partners at Fortis are Jeff Neal, Abdul Razak Al Hassan, and Uriah Hall. So he gets his fair share of looks at fast twitch kickboxers who can put a foot or a fist through very small windows. But I'm leaning Morono in this one. And obviously I have all the bias in the world. You know, I really like the guy. I rep Houston. But even among Houston fighters, I think of him as a really good dude who does a lot for the local scene. You know, and I would presume to call him a friend. But this is my upset special of the night. Pettis has not had a spectacular gas tank either at 155 or 170 in the last couple of years. Even though Morono is not a big, imposing welterweight, I think he'll have the capacity to make this fight go to the ground if he wants. So this is basically if the wild man Morono that lost to Chaos Williams, or that, you know, got busted up by Nico Price in that overturned fight, if he shows up, Pettis will find something, snipe him, and there'll be a TKO at some point in the 3 rounds. But I think he will see this as the opportunity it is. I think he'll be just enough more buttoned up that he's going to win this one. And I think he may even be the guy that initiates the ground game. He took Reese McKee down a couple of times, and I think those may have been the first takedowns he actually initiated in his entire UFC career. I think we might see more of that tonight, especially if Pettis is looking quick and sharp out there and Morono's getting stuff he doesn't like on the feet. But give me Alex Morono by decision in my upset pick of the night.
All right. Wow. So
I told you we were going to disagree on something tonight.
Oh, you don't know yet. We might not disagree. So you said that, you know, the book is out on who Morono is. I think the book is out on who Pettis is also. Now, you know, as a former champion, he'll never be a champion in the UFC again. I don't think he'll ever be a champion in any organization again, because he still has a lot of talent. But he has glaring weaknesses that a champion can't have. We'll talk about what the talent is. He's still very athletic, still very explosive, still very creative. Might be the most creative fighter in UFC history. I mean, we've been talking about his Showtime kick for 10 years now or whatever, maybe more. So you kind of never know what you're going to get with him. He's still pretty fast. He switches stances, can fight from both stances. He is crushing body kicks. His body kicks are still very good. His step back right hook is his best strike. He loves the switch kick, high kick. He also has that dipping reverse side high kick, which I like. Has a high guard, which is a issue considering he's been hurt to the body, and also because his weakness is his wrestling, so keeping his hands high. He also stands up too tall, kind of reaches with his hands, which some people can wrap around. Nate Diaz was having a lot of success wrapping around that. And he also back straight up. We saw RDA force him to back straight up where he had a field day against him. He hates pressure. Everyone who beats Anthony Pettis just pressures him. I think of Tony Ferguson. I think of Alex Morono's teammate, Carlos Diego Ferreira. Obviously, Rafael Dos Santos laid the groundwork for everyone to see. Even Eddie Alvarez used, a heavy pressure wrestling game. He still is a submission threat. At one time, that was probably the best part of his game was a submission, but that was back in 2013, 2014. That's not the same guy. He's a terrible defensive wrestler. Cardio is starting to fade too. The fight that really stands out to me where he faded was the Nate Diaz fight, where he was really slowing down late. Move over to Morono. Morono is a high output brawler. He's a wild man. He throws pretty much just hooks on the feet. He has decent power, and he unloads on every single thing he throws. I like his leg kick. He can be technical. He can work a jab. It's just not in his forte. He's a guy Safe Side would be screaming take some off of it, stay calm, jab, and Safe will scream jab, which means Alex will throw one jab, and then he's going to throw 12 hooks in a row, and then turn to Safe and said what do you mean? I threw 12 hooks in a row, and I threw one at 99% power, one of them. But he can jab and leg kick. I doubt he'll do that. The one thing that disturbs me is he's been hurt a lot. Even like his last fight in his whitewashing of Reese McKee, like Reese McKee actually hurt him to the body and that's actually when Alex Morono like turned it into a wrestling match late in the third round. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I don't think he uses his grappling enough because he's pretty good. He's not a great wrestler, but when he gets to the ground, he's good in transition. Like he took McKee down and went in like no time, went right to the mount and started grinding upon him right as the fight ended. He's a weak defensive wrestler though. I think go back to the Jordan Mean fight where Jordan Mean took him down over and over again, and he really struggled to get off bottom. So as far as a prediction, this is a big step up for Alex Morono going from Reese McKee to Pettis. We already talked about how weird of a fight it is for Pettis. Morono could outpace Pettis, or he can land a haymaker, and I think his best avenue of victory is what you said, is turn into a grappling match, a wrestling match. I feel like Pettis' grappling has really been declining. His wrestling's always been weak. Going back all the way to like when Rhode Island's own Mike Campbell was out wrestling him, but kept falling in submissions during the WEC days. But I just look at Morono as just a guy. He's just a guy in the UFC. I don't mean any disrespect to him, but he's a mid-level guy. And Pettis is still pretty solid. I think he's going to have his way with the body kicks. I think he's going to hurt him with a body kick, and I think he's going to drop him with a body kick and finish him off with a body kick. So I'm going to say Pettis wins by second round TKO.
There you have it, your first real dissension of the evening between your panelists here. We now move over to the main card of UFC Vegas 17 with the only heavyweight fight on the card. That is, unless one of our middleweights from the prelims misses weight really, really badly, which I suppose is not entirely impossible. But as scheduled, the only heavyweight fight on the card featuring Marcin Tybura versus Greg Hardy. Tybura, the 35-year-old from Poland, is 20-6 as a professional mixed martial artist, 8-4 of that within the UFC octagon. Hardy, the 32-year-old, is 7-2 with one no contest, 4-2 with one no contest in the UFC after two successful appearances on Dana White's Contender Series and then one fight on the regional scene. It's pretty close to a pick'em right now, but as of right now, you actually can get Tybura around plus 100. I see him plus 105 in one place, where Hardy is sitting around minus 115, minus 120. Before we even get into the picks, I will say that I'm kind of surprised that the UFC is still pushing forward with the Greg Hardy experiment. I'm kind of surprised they have not cut bait on this man yet. And it's not directly to do with his controversial past, even though that figures into it slightly, but in an era in which they are letting the Jussier Formigas, the Corey Andersons, the Yoel Romeros go in an effort to apparently just slash budget. They're looking at these guys and saying, hey, these are former title contenders who probably aren't going to contend for another title. And for what we're paying them, we can sign 10 people off the Contender Series. I'm kind of surprised that they are still going to such obvious lengths to find winnable fights for Greg Hardy, because nothing of what they would have signed him for has really panned out. He's not become a huge star or draw, and his potential as a star was kind of that Brock Lesnar thing where people either loved him or they hated him and wanted to tune in to see him get beat up. His individual fights, a lot of them just been kind of boring. And he does not have a stock off the showroom floor Contender Series contract. He's another guy who makes enough money that they could sign as many terrible heavyweights off the Contender Series as they want and see if any of them pan out better. So part of me is surprised that even though he's 4-2 with one no contest in the UFC, they haven't just given him like an Alistair Overeem or a Derek Lewis and just put a definitive end to this experiment. Because, they've matched him up with somebody in Tybura that, I'll get to my pick after you, but Tybura is about the most credible heavyweight in the UFC that Hardy has this obvious a path to victory against, is all I'll say at this point. I mean, do you feel any of that, or are you still, does it still make sense that the UFC is, kind of nurturing Hardy?
Yeah, it's a really hard, because there's a lot of layers to that. If he has more fights like he did against Yorgan De Castro or Ben Sassoli, he has those performances where they kind of, I know he didn't win the Ben Sassoli fight, but originally he did. Where then he wins, but they're kind of boring. Yeah, I think the leash would get very short on him. But then you have those moments like the Juan Adams fight. Say what you want about Juan Adams. When you throw Juan Adams and just overwhelm a 200 and probably 90-pound man with, and I know the weight class 265. I'm saying when he rehydrates like a maximum height of a guy, maximum size, and he manhandles, ragdolls a man like that, and just basically scares him with the ferocity. Those are the moments where they're like, wow, he could be special. Even his last fight against Maurice Green, he had those moments. So I think that helps him, but I also think like he gets a lot of credit for stepping up to take on Alexander Volkov in 3 weeks' notice in Russia. So I think that's helping him a little bit. But he's also like, if he goes on a losing streak, that might change.
Gotcha. And as far as this fight before us against Tybura, how do you see this one playing out?
So I guess I'll continue where I left off with Greg Hardy. So I actually think your questions kind of lead to my first point. He has been making improvements in his short UFC career, which I don't think he gets enough credit for, because I mean he's still very young in the game. And as I just mentioned, he gained tons of useful experience by facing Volkov on 3 weeks' notice. He is an NFL All-Pro, so he obviously is an elite athlete. He's massive for the weight class. He cuts down from, as he mentioned in his last fight, he cuts down from 290. He almost became the first heavyweight ever to miss weight. He was the first heavyweight ever to originally weigh in and miss weight, and he made it on the second attempt. He's explosive. He has serious power. I thought he actually showed some composure in his fight against Volkov, despite breaking his hand. I thought he showed some heart. I don't want to say heart when it comes to Greg Hardy, but like gusto, I guess. And he has a good chin. Like, he did not get knocked out by Volkov. Like, Volkov hit him with shots and he didn't go down. And he really wasn't even really badly hurt in that fight. He's been adding feints to his game. He suddenly has an okay job. He does lose a little bit of power in the jab because he pulls himself back a little, which he really needs to change. And he pulls his head straight back to avoid punches, which a high-level striker is going to make him pay for that, and it will knock him out. And he keeps his chin high. That said, I like some of the head movement he showed in the Maurice Green fight, though he's still, as I mentioned, he backs straight up a little bit. Volkov did have most of success with kicks down the middle to the body, though Hardy started adding kicks himself to his game. Kicks to the legs, kicks to the midsection. We saw it in the Ben Sassoli fight, a lot of kicks. He has been taken down a lot. He hasn't been taken down a lot since the Alan Crowder fight. And I'm assuming, he was training with American Top Team. I know he's with they changed the name so many times. The Black Zillions, whatever the new name is.
Sanford
MMA. So I know he's been training with those guys, and Rashad Evans kind of taking him on his wing. So I'm assuming his ground game has improved. And like the last time someone tried to take him down was the Juan Adams, and he hip tossed him. And he showed some top control in the fight against Maurice Green. So, and he had ground and pound to end that fight. So he has been showing improvements. That cardio could still be an issue, as we've seen him, in the Ben Sassoli fight. It's kind of a slow pace fight. He needed to go to the inhaler for the inhaler gate and all that. But another reason why I think he hasn't been taken down and his cardio hasn't been just too much is because guys give him so much respect for his power that no one really pressured him. I mean, like, Yorgan De Castro was scared of him, it seemed like. Moved it over to Tybura as a guy that switches stances, though he's probably better off in the southpaw position. His striking simply is just to back his opponent up, to back him towards the fence. He has high output to get it there, though he's probably pretty slow-fisted. He uses his striking more to just close distance. Though I think his front kick might be his best opponent, best weapon, especially against Hardy, as we saw Volkov have some success with that. He doesn't like being pressed himself. He likes to be the bully. He will close the distance and just grind against the fence. Like, that's where he feels comfortable. He'll grab it underhook and just wants a grueling matchup. He'll kind of press you there, then he'll just drop down in a single leg and run the pipe, get the takedown. And if you throw a kick at him, he'll catch a kick and take you down. He has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, so he could catch him a submission. This is a tough fight to pick, which years ago I would have laughed at. Like, how was Greg Hardy a match for Marcin Tybura? If Hardy can keep the distance and make this a distance striking affair, he has the physical tools to overwhelm Tybura and knock him out. Tybura is going to want to get to close quarters. He's going to want to wear down Hardy. The last one I saw do that was Alan Corrado, who had such sex. Like I mentioned, you expect Hardy to improve since then, but I haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to think that Tybura is going to clinch with Hardy a lot. I think he's going to get some takedowns. I think he might gas Hardy out, and I think he actually eventually locks in a submission. So I'll take Tybura by third round submission. Now, this is not the sexiest pick. As you mentioned, the odds are close, but I don't think there was one that many people thought I was going to take because I've seen some people like laughing at this matchup. So I'm locking this in as my upset special tonight, and that's Marcin Tybura by third round submission.
There you have it from Keith Schillen. Marcin Tybura, your upset special of the night. I can see the fight absolutely playing that way if Tybura can survive the first 4 minutes. It did teach me a lot to watch Hardy just completely pancake and toss Juan Adams, a probably 285-pound former Division I collegiate wrestler. There are lots of huge athletic guys that have passed through the heavyweight division. It doesn't always translate to good takedown defense, but Hardy seems to have it. He just seems to have good instincts for it. Maybe there's something about, defensive end hips that, that translates across. I don't know. In matching Tybura with Hardy, I mean, I already mentioned off the top that this is probably the highest ranked guy that Hardy has this direct of a path to victory against, because it is hard to find a 255-pound man without serious knockout power in his hands. But that's what Tybura is. His record is deceptive because most of his TKO wins were back in M1 before he got to the UFC, and even most of those were on the ground. He has one clean knockout on the feet that I can think of, and it's about 4 or 5 years ago. He is, as you put it, a grinder.
I can't even think of it.
He head kicked Victor Pesta in a guy that I think washed out of the UFC at like 0-3 or 1-3 or something. Yeah, all of Tybura's paths to victory go through having to get his hands on Hardy, and probably Hardy's going to need to be either hurt or tired. I think for as much as I just talked crap on why the UFC is even keeping him around, I don't think any of Tybura's recent opponents have prepared him for what he's going to face when he tries to put his hands on Greg Hardy. I mean, he's on a 3-fight win streak against Sergey Spivak, who has disappointed as a prospect and is one of the smallest heavyweights on the roster. Maxime Grishin, who is a light heavyweight prospect, who is even disappointed at light heavyweight, and then Ben Rothwell, who's definitely been in decline. Nothing's prepared him for the speed or strength he's going to deal with. I have Hardy by first round knockout in this one. And that's not because I think Hardy is that much better or this is that much of a lock, but I only really see two outcomes. I see Hardy by first round knockout or Tybura by late submission.
Yeah. And
I'm just picking.
That's exactly how I see it too.
Yeah. And it's basically a coin flip between those two. Well, not quite a coin flip because I am favoring Hardy here, but it is not by any means my lock of the night. As this goes past 90 seconds, with each passing second, I'm just going to be cringing more and more and expecting my pick to look dumber and dumber. because Hardy's gas tank has been treachery, especially since they found his asthma inhalers. And so I'm picking Greg Hardy to survive, advance, keep that UFC contract going into next year. And I guess we'll see what we see from him. And meanwhile, Tybura on a 3-fight win streak, is probably safe even if he does get knocked out.
Can I ask you a question before we move on?
Absolutely.
I got to put you on the spot. You said that Greg Hardy is unlike or basically Tybura hasn't faced anybody recently that would prepare you for Greg Hardy. Are you telling me that Sergey Spivak and Ben Rothwell couldn't play in the NFL?
Oh, man.
I mean, listen, as bad as my Patriots are doing, I think I might take Big Ben.
I mean, hey, Rothwell kind of looks like a guy that could have played line at like the D2 level, or he just looks like an offensive lineman. But
you know what he would look like? The guy who played offensive lineman in the movie.
Oh, central casting offensive lineman for sure. And I mean, once upon a time, he actually was kind of nimble-footed for as big a guy as he was. It was kind of his secret weapon. And by God, you got me talking about Ben Rothwell in the middle of a 13-fight card. We're terrible for each other at this. Oh my goodness. With that, we move from the biggest people on the card to a couple of the smallest, as Gillian Robertson takes on Taila Santos in the UFC women's flyweight division. Robertson, the 25-year-old Canadian, is 9-4 as a mixed martial artist, 6-2 within the UFC. She'll be taking on Santos. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 16-1 overall, 1-1 in the UFC, having lost her debut out of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil to Mara Romero Barella, then bounced back with a win over Molly McCann this July. Right now, this one is a straight pick 'em. Both women sitting right around -110. How do you feel about this one, Keith?
Yeah, I actually think the line should be pretty close. This is an intriguing matchup. It's actually one of the fights that I'm pretty excited about, actually. So I'll start with Gillian Robertson. The thing that really surprised me is I got to keep checking her record and her age. Gillian Robertson has 8 fights already in the UFC, and she's only 25, which just seems insane. Like, I can't – like, I start thinking of her a veteran, and I'm like, oh, my God, she's 25. She's pretty one-dimensional, though, if I'm being honest. Her striking is pretty ugly. She needs some serious growth. But at 25, she is at the age where she can make that. But from what I currently see, she's pretty stiff. She lacks head movements. She has no power because she mostly arm throws, doesn't really step into the stance. Her kicking game has shown signs where I think that can be the strength. She could be a Marlon Vera, very heavy kick game. Good entries, though, on her takedowns. That's where she wants to get down. If she doesn't get you on the hips, she's willing to just catch a kick and just bull rush you over. Suffocating top control. Really emphasizes position over submission. Constantly looking to work a better position. A good point of reference is her fight against Courtney Casey, where she was not in a rush to look for the submission, but she is a submission threat. Has 6 submission wins on her record, including the Courtney Casey fight late in the fight where she was just consistently working. Taila Santos is also young. She's only 27 herself, as you mentioned. She's had 2 fights in the UFC, and they're night and day. She was terrible against Mara Barella, but then she was great against Molly McCann. She's a good striker, really marches down her opponents. Some nice snap on her strikes. She builds as the fight goes on. I'm going to say this. I'm waiting. I don't know how many fights we're in, but I can finally say this. I love her step-in knee. Good kicks. She loves her front kick to the body. I don't like that she moves straight back on the center line to avoid blitzes, which Robertson can use to back her towards the fence. She also has a very classic Muay Thai style that needs to be adjusted to me, where she stands up pretty high because of that, which is you see a lot in Muay Thai. But the advantage of her Muay Thai background is she's strong in the clinch, throws great knees in the clinch, does good posting and framing in the clinch. She can get some takedowns and some trips in the clinch. Solid body locks from there. She showed good back takes. She's pretty well advanced in the ground. She also looks to advanced position. She has a submission threat. Takedown defense though is a little bit of an issue, and she struggled to get off the bottom. She struggled to get off the bottom with Morono Burrell on the top, but she was attacking with submissions from the bottom, so I like that. This is a really tough fight to call. The Santos that faced Molly McCann, I think, beats Gillian Robertson. The opponent that faced Morono Burrell probably loses to Gillian Robertson. It's kind of very similar to what I talked about the other female fight with Sijara Eubanks. So who shows up? It's a tough call. Santos is more well-rounded, but Robertson is relentless. I'm going to take Santos to stop enough takedowns and land some shots, and she simply just has more avenues to victory, and she might be able to match Robertson on the ground, but she definitely will have the advantage, I think, in the clinch and, distance striking. So I say it's going to be fun because I think Robertson will get some takedowns. So I'm going to say Santos wins by split decision.
Excellent. I feel the same dynamic here. And as fun as Robertson is to watch, and as honestly surprising as it is to see that she is 6-2 in the UFC now, even though Santos, her only win in the UFC is over Molly McCann, that's still probably Robertson's best win in the UFC as well. Like going over there, beating her in the UK when she was clearly being brought in to, hopefully get the hometown girl a winnable fight, but she just, thrashed her. She out-grappled her in the first round, then put her away in the second. That still might be the best fight or the best win of Robertson's UFC run so far. The Macy Barber fight showed me what it looks like when Robertson takes on someone who is bigger, stronger, more athletic. Whatever you may say about her record coming up, talking about Santos, and I certainly underestimated her just because I saw the kind of Astra Fight Team thing and that she had so many fights in their home promotion. But she is the going to be the bigger, stronger, more athletic woman against Robertson. And I'm just having a tough time picturing Robertson, especially in the early going, securing takedowns. She doesn't have like a fast shot. She doesn't have, like any lightning quick, tricky entries. Certainly nothing that Santos couldn't meet with one of those intercepting knees that you love so much. And then I think the clinch is just going to be danger zone for Robertson, especially at least through the first half of the fight. The one thing that she has going for her is that she is relentless and has thus far demonstrated a very good gas tank, where Santos's gas tank is still a bit of a question mark. I could see Robertson hanging on to get a submission late, but I think by the third round, she's going to be behind 2-1 and is not going to have enough to finish it. So give me also Santos by decision, even if she has to hold on to get it. We now move to the bantamweight division, where former World Series of Fighting champ Marlon Moraes takes on the returning Rob Font. Moraes, the 32-year-old, is 23-7-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 5-3 in the UFC. He is 32 years old. Font, the Boston native, 33 years old, 17-4 as a mixed martial artist, 7-3 in the UFC, though he has just appeared twice in the last 2 years. He last fought Ricky Simon in December of 2019. His last fight before that, this will tell you a lot, was against Sergio Pettis in December of 2018. Moraes, the slight favorite, available around minus 145 right now, where you can get Font on the comeback at plus 125. Keith, is it going to be a happy return for Rob Font?
I don't know. That's a tough question. This is a really, really good matchup. I'll start with Moraes. He's only 32 years old, but he might not have a lot of tread left on his tires. You go back to his last 3 fights. Yeah, he lost to Henry Cejudo, got taken out. squeaked by decision over Jose Aldo, a fight that many people thought he lost. Personally, I thought that Moraes did deserve to win in that, but it's an extremely close fight that could have went the other way, and then got knocked out by Corey Sandhagen fairly easily in devastating fashion. The good about Marlon Moraes, he's still fast. He's still explosive. He still has good power. He can still fight from both stances, though I prefer his orthodox stance. Good lateral movement still. He can still work from space well. He has those quick bursts of offense that can really overwhelm people. Most of his best strikes, though, from the orthodox stance, where I think is his strong stance, comes from the left side. You can have like two things you have to really watch out for. First is that crushing left hook he has, and then he has that legendary switch kick that he throws a lot. I mean, he almost knocked out Jose Aldo right in the very beginning of the fight with it. That said, and this might be a thing. I'm still developing this narrative on him, but I think it might be true. I think he might be a front runner. He's one of these guys that if he can't get you out early and he can't dazzle you with his athleticism, he tends to fold. He kind of likes to big brother you, or he kind of likes to be the bully, and then when the nerdy kid stands up to him, he kind of cowers. And obviously, I'm not saying Marlon Moraes, who fights professionally, is a coward. I'm using a reference. He doesn't like to be pressured. I mean, Henry Cejudo folded when pressured. Jose Aldo was having success with pressure. Corey Sandhagen, who's more of a counter striker, pressured him late pressured him at the end of that fight in the second round and take him out. Moraes, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He can sneak in a scramble, and he is takedown and is pretty good in scrambles. He is a submission threat. I like that. But the biggest concern I have with Moraes in this fight is he's having a quick turnaround. He's fighting, I think he fought 2 months ago, and supposedly he broke his orbital bone in that fight. So I don't like that. Over to Ron Font, he's been so inactive that you kind of start to forget about him a little bit. That said, from when we last saw him, we saw his confidence growing. Like, he's really getting comfortable in the cage. He looked good in his recent bout, and he kind of knows it now. He also switches stances, but I also think he's better in the orthodox stance. He's very technically sound. He likes just to walk down his opponent, and everything comes off his jab. It's by far his best best tool. In his last fight, his coach/manager, Tyson Chartier, said, "You can't throw enough jabs," and I kind of agree with that. Like that's his move, and people have a hard time getting around it. And he uses that jab to set up his power punches, particularly his right hand, which he lands because of the jab, because of the feints he throws. He attacks with combos, though he does lack one punch true knockout power. Like, he's not a big hit you on the chin and you're going to sleep. He has a high guard defense. And he also has good vision. He sees a lot of things that come at him. He also understands range well, which when you throw at Rob Font, when he moves his head, he moves it just out of your reach and then comes back with his long range, because he understands that he usually has a longer reach advantage where he can still hit you from that area where you can't. He's been hurt to the body, though. Like, that's been his weakness. He will sneak in a takedown, and I've seen it a lot more recently. It's like more, he was never known as a wrestler, but he's starting to. And like, he took down Ricky Simone's last fight, and he shoots up and he kind of comes very high in the body lock position, and that's not really the strength of him. But like I said, he mentioned he took down Ricky Simone. He actually took down Sergio Pettis several times. He's a decent grappler. He has 4 submission wins on his record, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. He makes matters worse because he'll jump on a guillotine instead of sprawling out and kind of making the takedown easier. Though I'll give him credit, he does get up from bottom fairly well. This is such a hard one to pick. It comes down to, what does Marlon Moraes has left versus is Rob Font a top-level guy? Because if he beats Marlon Moraes, he is. That said, Moraes still should have the power advantage in this fight. If this was a 5-round fight, I think I would take Font. I think I would take Font to outwork him. However, being that it's just 3, I can see Moraes getting out early and causing Font to have to play catch-up. And I actually think that's what's going to happen. I think Font's going to win the 3rd round, but I think he might just run out of time. So I'm going to take Moraes in a close decision. I know I'm taking a lot of decisions tonight, and that's usually not the way I go, but I don't think either guy takes him out, so I'll take Moraes by decision.
I feel It's interesting that you brought up a lot of the points that I was going to bring up, but I'm coming at some of them from the opposite angle. I can't believe that Rob Font is older than Marlon Moraes. It feels like Moraes should be 5 years older. Partly due to Font's inactivity, because people who aren't fighting every 3 months, like in my mind, I guess they just don't age. They're just being stored in like a glass case somewhere. Whereas, Moraes has been a top name fighter for so long now. You forget how young he was in that World Series of Fighting run. So even though Moraes isn't older chronologically, he still feels older in terms of mileage to me. And even though this is only a 3-round fight, and I completely agree with you that if it were a 5-round fight, I would favor Font even more. I do worry about Moraes' gas tank and durability. He strikes me as someone who's always had a pretty steep weight cut that can't be getting easier as he gets into his 30s. And he did fight just like 9 weeks ago in a pretty rough fight. His fight against Sandhagen, it only lasted a round and a half, but, it was a rough fight for him. I expect Font will, probably take some damage in the early going. These are two of the harder hitters at bantamweight, but Font's been in there. He hasn't fought the same level of competition as Moraes, obviously, who, he only missed out on a title shot due to a bunch of circumstances this year. But even if Font has not fought like quite the same top level of opposition, he has fought some of the hardest hitters in the division. And they've not been able to get him out of there. And because of that, I'm trusting that Moraes probably won't either. And Moraes is likely to fade as the fight goes along, as Font just puts his ridiculous pace on him, but is able to keep that pace going for longer. So I'm going to pick Font by decision in this one, in one where he is kind of pulling away as the fight goes along, and maybe even has Moraes in trouble by the end of the fight.
It's funny that the guy from Houston picks the New Englander, but the guy from New England does not pick the New Englander. Let me ask you this question before we move on. And I know this is a long show because we had so many fights, but at this point in their careers, do you think it would be better for the UFC if Rob Font won? Because I do.
The only reason I would say it's better if Moraes wins is because if he wins, he would be an obvious choice to be slotted into a title fight immediately. But this is a division where they're not exactly short of title contenders. It's not great for Moraes, but for the UFC, if Moraes never gets a title shot, it's no big deal. You've still got Aljamain Sterling just sitting there like looking at his watch. You've still got Henry Cejudo who could come back at any moment, and presumably he butts in front of the line since he never lost the title in the cage. So the UFC doesn't need Marlon Moraes to deserve a title shot. So I'd say, yeah, it's better for the UFC overall if Font wins. Now we head to the welterweight division, where we have a fight that if you hear the UFC booth say, don't blink, don't get out of your seat, anything could happen, rarely is it more true than it is when talking about Michel Pereira versus Kaylin Chaos Williams. Pereira is 27 years old. He is 24-11 with 2 no contests in his professional career, 2-2 in the UFC, with a victory in his debut over Danny Roberts, a loss to Tristan Connolly, a disqualification loss for an illegal knee to the head of Diego Sanchez while Sanchez was grounded, and then a win via rear naked choke over Zalim Imadaev just this past September. He will be facing Kaylin Williams, the man with 2 nicknames, Chaos and the Ox Fighter, is 26 years old. He is 11-1 in his professional career. He is 2-0 in the UFC, having knocked out Alex Morono back in February in 27 seconds and knocked out Abdul Razak Al Hassan on November 14th in 30 seconds. Odds are close on this one. Pereira sitting as a slight favorite around -130, where you can get Williams at +110 right now. I am happy and pleased to see what Kalen Williams has been able to do in the UFC. His UFC debut, where he came in on short notice when Diego Lima had to pull out of his fight with Alex Morono, that was back in February in Houston, the last event I covered live before COVID happened. And I remember being there in the press scrums where you're in a hotel ballroom and they're all sitting in their little stations around the edges of the room. Suffice it to say that Kalen Williams did not have a line in front of him. He was fighting Morono in Morono's hometown. There were people on that card, that had big, long lines in front of him. He had no line whatsoever. It was just the easiest thing in the world to walk up and talk to the guy. And even ahead of his UFC debut, he's coming in on, it was somewhere between 5 and 10 days notice. Nobody knew who he was. He was at least a 2-1 underdog. He had a smooth confidence about him. There was no pretense that he didn't have to put on any sort of salesman persona. He was just talking about how pleased he was that he was going to be able to show what he was able to do. Talked about it as though he already had the fight won. And sure enough, he did 27 seconds later. That he was able to duplicate that in his next appearance. It looks like we have a problem on our hands. And the thing about the two fights, and I think I said this in the recap after the Al Hassan fight, the first fight against Morono, that was just a wild brawl. I mean, all credit to Williams for having that kind of power and that kind of hand speed. But, that was a 27-second wild brawl that didn't necessarily teach us too much about the debuting fighter. The Al Hassan knockout was a nifty one. Just fantastic short right hand. And just collided with him and completely put him under for one of the scariest knockouts of the year. Pereira, even when he came to the UFC, his prospect / contender status was a little overstated. I mean, the guy had 9 losses before he even got to the UFC. He was what he was. He was the owner of one of the most hilarious and outlandish highlight reels you'll ever find on YouTube. But I'm frankly surprised that he's 2-2 in the UFC. I assumed he was going to wash out quickly. This guy was not Johnny Walker. They're both Brazilians who are really, really exuberant and celebrate funny, but they were not in the same league as prospects. Pereira just throws caution to the wind on the regional scene, and in his first couple UFC performances, very defensively porous guy, and just would run his gas tank down shockingly fast. The Spike Carlisle thing, where it's not that you're not in good shape, it's just that you're burning your energy 3 times faster than the other guy, and for the most part, unnecessarily, just with unnecessary movement and unnecessary strain. And he seems to have improved that. Against Sanchez and against Imadaev, he was a little more measured. Still a wild man, but more measured. Looked like, both those fights went to the 3rd round. One of them he won, and one of them he was winning before he illegally, knocked Diego Sanchez out. Having said that, I still like Williams in this one. I think Williams is he's too sharp of a boxer. His vision, his hand speed, his footwork, they're too good. I think he's just going to catch Pereira while Pereira is doing something silly. And I think he's just going to knock him out. I don't have much analysis deeper than that. Just that I think Williams is not going to be drawn into the circus show that Pereira wants to give us. And he's just going to put a hand or a foot on his jaw sometime in the first 5 minutes. Give me Kalen Williams by first round knockout.
Wow. So you talked about Kalen Williams, Chaos Williams, about having this confidence about him. He has the confidence of a man that has 2 nicknames. That's how confident he is.
If he keeps doing this, he can have a 3rd one. He should start thinking about it.
That's right. So it's hard to actually evaluate the guy when he has 2 fights in UFC, and the longer one was 30 seconds. Going back to his regional scene, and he, even just those 30 seconds, you can see big improvement from the regional guy. When he was coming in originally, he wasn't a guy that I was particularly excited about, but just watching him, the guy throws hard. He throws everything with bad intentions. He has big power. I like that he presses the action. He will attack with the calf kicks, though he does throw them naked, which can get himself caught. He has some defensive flaws. He drops his hands a little. He keeps his chin high, but he has a good chin. Like, I've seen him get fights, and he's been hit with some shots, and he doesn't get rocked. And he's a good wrestler. Like, he can throw in some takedowns. I wouldn't say he's not Deron Winn, but he can get some takedowns. Move that over to Michel Pereira. I'm going to say this right away. If Michel Pereira plays those games like he did in the first couple of fights against Chaos Williams is going to knock him out cold. Regardless, he can knock him out cold anyways, but if he plays stupid games, he's going to get knocked out. The thing that jumps out to me, besides all the dancing and all the theatrics, is how big of a man Michel Pereira is. He's humongous. He's got long arms. He's got long legs. He's crazy athletic. Get beyond all the circus acts. He's crazy athletic. He's got great movement. He's so agile. He's fast. He's explosive. He has got big power. He really stalked Diego Sanchez in his last his matchup against him, and really showed some composure that he hadn't showed. And he's a good distance striker, which he really showed against Salim Ahmadayev. Good kicks. He likes to do oblique kicks, the teep kicks. A lot of kicks that you don't see a lot. Not unconventional kicks like the oblique kick. Will attack the body. I love his step and knee. But believe it or not, his step and knee is not what I like best about him. I actually like his flying knee because he uses it both offensively and defensively. He backs you up against the cage where he'll try to close the distance with the flying knee. Or even more impressive is probably how he uses it defensively is he will time your attacks come in and just kind of jump in and throw it. He's a good wrestler. I mean, he slammed Diego Sanchez. He suplexed Imadaev. Kind of submitted Imadaev in that fight. If you want to credit that, that was the one. If you remember, he got a submission in at the end of the fight, and the referee thought he tapped, but he actually didn't. As you mentioned, he wasted too much energy in that stupid stuff. Though he hasn't done that too bad recently. This is a fun fight. Why I didn't pick this as my fight tonight, I have no idea. Now that I'm thinking about it. I can't wait for the intros. Like, that might be the thing I'm most excited about when they get introduced. And Pereira is over one area breakdancing, and then Chaos is in the other side with the most intense stare down in history. I'm gonna go with. We're gonna disagree. I'm gonna go with Pereira. I'm gonna do it with much trepidation. Williams is really good. He's definitely one of the breakout stars of 2020. I just don't have enough on him to evaluate him. And Pereira has some really good skills if we get past all the theatrics. So I'm going to say that he's going to use common sense and don't try that against someone as deadly as Chaos Williams. And I'm going to say Pereira, he struggled to get, he third round fight against Diego Sanchez. He didn't get him out early. And Madaev, he didn't get out early. I mean, Tristan Conley, he couldn't get out early, so I don't think he'll get this one out early. So I'm going to say Pereira by unanimous decision.
There you have it. More dissension as we move towards the top of the card. We arrive at the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 183, which will see Jose Aldo taking on Marlon Cheeto Vera. Aldo, about as close a thing as you can find in this sport to a living, active legend, is 34 years old. He is 28-7 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is officially 10-6 in the UFC, but that extends to 18-6 if you count his undefeated championship run in World Extreme Cage Fighting, whose featherweight division, of course, was brought across wholesale when the UFC absorbed that promotion. He will be taking on Vera. The 28-year-old Ecuadorian is 16-6-1 in his professional career, 10-4 in the UFC. Vera is the slight underdog at plus 125, where Aldo is minus 145 as the favorite. Is this a changing of the guard, Keith, or will this be Jose Aldo's first official on the books win in the UFC bantamweight division?
Oh man, now that you say that, I was like, oh my god, he actually hasn't even won in the division yet, and he's challenged for the title. We'll talk about that. Jose Aldo, an absolute massive bantamweight. I mean, he was much bigger than Petron in their fight. He's probably the best mid-range striker in UFC history. He's definitely the best at just simply holding his ground with his striking. He's a pressure counter striker. Still has good power. Still keeps his hands tight to his head. Got that pop and jab. He throws his power shots straight down the pipe. I love that he attacks the body. He hurt Jeremy Stevens with a body shot recently. Hurt Renato Moicano with a body shot recently. One of my all-time favorite combos, besides breaking down a fight, we're just talking about like a combination that people throw. I'll always think of Jose Aldo's kick to punch combo, which is completely different than what most people do. They do like a punch to a kick, like they'll throw punches, finish with a kick. Jose Aldo will like throw a kick and get you like off balance with a kick and follow up with a right hand. Like he'll like inside kick, left inside kick, right hand. I absolutely love that. His chin is a major question mark at this point of his career. I mean, you think about it, he got knocked out by Conor McGregor, got knocked out by Max Holloway twice. He had that war against Chad Mendes. Just the amount of ground and pound damage he got in the Petron fight that went on way too long. The referee should stop earlier. That's obviously troublesome. Another thing that's concerning to me is how gun-shy he was in the Volkanovski fight when Volkanovski was fainting. Move over to Marlon Vera, obviously southpaw, long and lengthy southpaw. Go back to McGregor, has given Jose Aldo obviously issues. The thing I like about Marlon Vera is he can fight from both inside and outside. Though he actually prefers coming inside. He stalks his foe. He has decent power. He has got a great kicking game. That's when I talk about Gillian Robertson saying that she can have a kicking game where it's, that is the more the thing you have to worry more than the hands. That's what Marlon Vera is. Like his kicks are more of a threat than his hands are. He has a solid chin and incredible heart. We've seen him get hurt and continue on and gut out victories. But the reason why we've seen him get hurt is because he's got a lot of defensive flaws. He drops his hands a lot. He's very hittable. He's a slow starter. He almost loses every first round in fights he is. Though, to his credit, he really builds late. He comes on strong as the fight comes on. Nice knees in the clinch. Because he uses his long length. He will get a takedown, though he's not a powerful wrestler. He'll like to catch a kick and overwhelm you, or just time a reactive takedown. He has a good grappler though. Slick back takes. He is a submission threat. He can get submissions off his back. I think he's a 10th planet BJJ black belt. I think if I could be, I apologize. Yeah, 10th planet, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And he has like badass ground and pound. I mean, you just have to ask Sean O'Malley about that. Aldo is still technically, so as for predictions, Aldo is still technically sound and skilled. Like, if I think about like a video game, in his prime, like if you were having like his characteristics, you'd have him at a 10. I feel like all his skills, you just moved down to like a 7 or 8. But it wasn't like one area went way down. That said, I'm still not sold on Marlon Vera. Kind of what I said to Rob Font, like I'm not sure he's a top level guy yet. I don't know if Marlon Vera is. He's good. I just don't think he's elite. 3 rounds helps Aldo, especially with how much of a slow starter Marlon Vera is. So I think Aldo is automatically going to win the first round. Does he have enough to win the second round? I think he hits faster and harder than Marlon Vera. So I'm going to say that Aldo turns back the clocks more times and he wins a decision. And not only does he win a decision, he also wins by lock of the night. I'm locking this in. I'm very confident. I had to go bold. I wasn't going to take some huge, massive favorite. I'm going again. Jose Aldo, my lock of the night.
You just about convinced me to flip my pick there. I feel about this one just in terms, like, not because they're similar fighters, but just in terms of the dynamic, how I felt about a recent fight by somebody that Aldo's actually faced twice in Frankie Edgar. Edgar, ahead of his fight with Korean Zombie. I ended up favoring Edgar just because I said I haven't seen Edgar yet lose to a fighter with kind of the flaws that Korean Zombie has, that's on the level Korean Zombie is, which no offense at all to him, but just, everyone else that had beaten Edgar at that point was basically champions and Brian Ortega. And I said, this is a step down from there. I don't quite see it. And I was wrong. Just, the time finally caught up with Edgar. And it was just, the younger guy's time. I'm kind of feeling that about this one. Like, this is a step down for Aldo from his last couple fights. But, I mean, even if he's not what he once was, he lost to Alex Volkanovski, who, as it turns out, is a pretty good featherweight, drops down, has a really close fight with Marlon Moraes, and then he definitely loses to Peter Yan, but he gave Peter Yan a tougher fight than basically anybody else in the UFC has. So, I mean, there's a slowing that's happened with Aldo. He's not the monster he was 10 years ago, but it's not like there are huge holes in the armor. But that decline has got to come sooner or later. He is one of the oldest 34-year-old fighters this sport has ever seen. Because even by the time he got into the WEC, he had fought a lot in Brazil. He was fighting when he was like 19 or 20 years old, and he fought a ton. Even though it's worked out for him, I still don't love the move to 135 at this point in his career. I think the fight's going to play out along the dynamic that you laid out here, but put me down for thinking that Vera will come on soon enough that he will pick up the second and third rounds. So I have a fight that looks about like you have it, but I have Vera by decision, and this could be one that's a splitter because the judges don't all see that swing round the same way. I don't know. This is definitely not my lock of the night, but it is my fight of the night. And win or lose, I think this will be one of the last great hurrahs from Jose Aldo, one of the 5, maybe 10 best fighters we've ever seen. We won't even start that conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Or this show will get 45 minutes longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, put me down for Vera by decision. And with that, we arrive at the main event of the final event in the Ultimate Fighting Championship in 2020, a welterweight matchup between two gentlemen we haven't seen in a little bit, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Jeff Hands of Steel Neal, two men who will be fighting for the first time this year on Saturday night. Thompson, 37 years old, is 15-4-1 as a mixed martial artist, 10-4-1 in the UFC. The highlights of that career, of course, being 2 welterweight title challenges against Tyron Woodley. Neal is 30 years old. He is 13-2 in his professional career. He is 5-0 since joining the UFC off of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. In that time, he's beaten Brian Camozzi, Frank Camacho, Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, and Mike Perry. The odds have been close all along, but they have flipped. When odds were first posted, Thompson was a slight favorite. It went through quite a while as a virtual pick'em, but as of Wednesday night when we're recording this, Thompson is actually a slight underdog. You can get him at plus 103, where for Neal, you're looking around minus 115 or minus 120. The great thing about welterweight is that it is such a deep division with such a wealth of fighters who present different styles and perform them at a high level. You know, some of the best strikers in the UFC are at welterweight, some of the best grapplers, some of the best wrestlers. It's just, there's such a diversity of people fighting at a high level that the UFC can come out and surprise you with a matchup that you love and you didn't know you needed it until you heard about it. And another reason for that is that the division is so deep that a guy can spend a full year away and you almost kind of forget about him. I don't know how I forgot about Stephen Thompson, but I forgot that Stephen Thompson was a thing. Neal was supposed to come back in August, had some serious health issues. It is certainly a question mark to me what he will look like physically because of that. Not that he's still sick, but just, will the interruption in his training have any impact on him? With Thompson, my concern is over his age. He is 37 years old, and while his style doesn't completely operate on speed, it certainly has benefited from it. His style kind of bewilders and gives pause to just about anybody. But when he has the speed advantage as well, that is when he has gotten some of his most spectacular knockouts and highlights. I can't wait to see the striking match. Thompson has a unique style. He comes from a karate background. He had a decorated career in both points and full contact karate before ever crossing over to MMA. And he just does things that no other fighter in UFC history has done at a high level. It's easy to compare him on a basic level to Lyoto Machida because they both have the side-on stance and will bounce in and out. But, beyond that, Thompson has a kicking game and a level of dexterity with his feet that just, again, simply nobody has done in the UFC, at least at a high level. Like, nobody's done to top 10 fighters what he's done to them with his kicks. I'm scared to see how this will work when he takes on Jeff Neal. As I said, Thompson has been slowing just a bit. His style, where he bounces in and out, he keeps his hands ultra low. He uses his front foot kick as kind of a rangefinder, the way a boxer would use his jab. Those are like spectacular and fun to watch when they are working. But if they're not working, they are a recipe to end up staring at the lights. And, Thompson has ended up staring at the lights once in recent memory as Anthony Pettis just completely laid him out. Now he's taking on Jeff Neal, who is a much more conventional kickboxer or, boxer with kicking. But Neal's, his athleticism, his hand speed is spectacular. He's a guy that delivers monstrous power just naturally without seeming to load up on everything. Like, even his little shots hurt people. And we've talked about this before. There's a difference between people who have power because they're throwing their fastball with everything. And then there are people that just have power because they have that lead in their fist. They have just some sort of natural biomechanical advantage that just their fists hit harder. Part of it's physical and part of it's just, nice, clean technique. Despite the fact that, he did get knocked out by Pettis, I don't think Thompson's chin is a particular weakness at this point, but it doesn't need to be a particular weakness for him to get knocked out by Jeff Neal. Neal is certainly the hardest straight hitter that Thompson will have faced since the two fights with Woodley, but I think Neal will he'll be in a better position to deliver that power to Thompson's face. He's a taller, longer guy. He throws even though Woodley's a good and effective boxer, or he became one by 2017, Neal throws a greater variety of strikes and has better range on them. I can't pick him to knock out Thompson, but I think this is going to be a pretty lopsided win for Neal. I think Thompson will be tricky. I think Neal will have to make some adjustments early. Maybe he'll lose the first round. Maybe Thompson will touch him up some. But Neal with safe Saud in his corner will make adjustments between rounds. He'll start catching Thompson, and I expect him to win this going away. I think he's going to put quite a bit of damage on Thompson, and I think we might see the beginning of the end of Stephen Thompson as like a potential future title contender. give me Neal by a fairly one-sided unanimous decision.
Wow. So first of all, I think you had a fantastic breakdown. You pointed out a lot of technical things that both guys do so well. Obviously, I'll start with Stephen Thompson. Well, first of all, I would say this is such a great main event. So Leon Edwards and Khamzat Chimaev would have a better storyline, I think, heading in. I think that would really excite me, the storyline. But from a stylistic sense, this main event was so fun to break down on film. Stephen, we were talking off air. Stephen Thompson does things that I pride myself in my knowledge of technical aspects. I've spent a lot of time in boxing rooms, and he does some things that I'm not on that level of understanding. He is such a dynamic striker. I mean, he was 57-0 in kickboxing. I mean, what else you got to know? He's obviously a southpaw, but he's one of the best fighters to be able to switch out of both stances flawlessly. He's so athletic, so elusive. As you mentioned, he keeps his hands dangerously low, but he makes up with his amazing head movement, where he, similar to what we talked about Rob Font, where he moves his head just out of range, but can still leave himself in the opportunity to come back with his own stuff. Great lateral movement. He has that, bladed karate stance, but just people don't see a lot, so that gives them fits. Fast hands. You said he uses his kicks like we move around our hands. He just moves his feet that way. Great jab. I think about some of his recent fights. He jabbed up Jorge Masvidal with the jab. He hacked up Vicente Luque with the jab. He is a counter striker at heart. He's fantastic at that. The thing I think I'm most favorite that Stephen Thompson does is he's so good at forcing his opponents to start to chase him. And then while they're chasing him, he knows where they're going to be because he was just there 1 second prior. And he can stop on a dime and land a strike to that spot before the person stops moving, which is incredible. Something actually Joanna Jędrzejczyk was very successful in the Jessica Andrade fight. This is what Stephen Thompson does pretty much to everybody. He just gets people guessing with the amount of variety of strikes. He has incredible kicks. He loves that front hook kick. He loves his side. He does a side push kick. He knocked Vicente Luque down with the side push kick. He actually knocked Jorge Masvidal with that side push kick. But he isn't solely a counter striker. Like, that's what's great about him. Like, he can be the one pressing the action. Like, he can suddenly just blitz with a combination. He ends combos with kicks. He has been trigger shy. That's one of the knocks on him. He was trigger shy in the second fight against Woodley, against Darren Till. Sometimes he gives too much respect to people's power. He is also open to leg kicks. That karate style leaves him that. Like, that was something that Darren Till was having some success with. And if you remember, Stephen Thompson's front leg was really red from the kicks from Till. He also, for such a dynamic striker, he isn't, and I feel like I broke a record with this on this card, he isn't a one-punch knock-you-out guy. And even when he does hurt his opponents, he kind of lacks the killer instinct. Like, he'll step back and give him a high five when he should be swarming them with combinations. And his chin, as you mentioned, at his age, his chin might start becoming an issue. I mean, he was dropped by Tyron Woodley. He was dropped by Darren Till late in their fight. He was obviously knocked out by Anthony Pettis. He was even hurt at one point early in the fight against Luque. Not even rocked, but you could tell it bothered him. He stepped back. His offensive wrestling is almost non-existent, though I think his takedown wrestling has been pretty good. Moving over to Jeff Neal, southpaw. I love how relaxed he is. He just stays so relaxed and loose. He has great vision which is, I think he's 30 or 31, so he's not young.
30.
He's 30 years old, so he's not young. But he seems like he's still new in the UFC. He's just so relaxed, and he has great vision. He's light on his feet. I like his high guard defense. It's hard to get past his defenses. As you mentioned, incredibly fast hands. He's accurate. Nice snap on his punches. Big power. He throws punches straight down the pipe. He has this crushing high kick, which he throws after someone throws at him. He'll throw a high kick as a counter, which I think love. Oh, one issue he has, and it's actually something that DC mentioned in the Bilal Muhammad fight. He's a headhunter. He like ignores the body, which I wish he would really go to the body because it would make him even better. Unlike Thompson, though, he has a killer instinct. If Jeff Neal gets you hurt, he's gonna put your lights out. I don't like that he's been hurt to the body, as Bilal Muhammad did hurt him in the body. But Bilal Muhammad is also a very good fighter in the division. He's got good takedown defense, decent takedowns himself. I mean, he actually used a lot of wrestling against Nico Price, hard ground and pound, as he knocked out Nico Price with ground and pound. And the last thing that I'm concerned about him, though, is the 25 minutes. Like, we haven't seen him go deep into a fight. Going from Mike Perry to Stephen Thompson is as big of a gap in technical skill as any gap in history. That said, this is such a great bout. It's a hard fight to pick. I mean, you get, Neal's speed versus Thompson's technique. We've picked 5 fights in a row differently. I want to keep the streak going. You asked the last fight if it was a change in the guard from Jose Aldo to the younger fighter, Marlon Vera. I think it is in this fight. It really sucks to prick against such a great dude like Stephen Thompson. Besides being one of the greatest strikers in the history of the UFC, and he's just like, he might be the greatest dude. Just a nice guy. Like, I don't know him personally, and I just don't like picking against him because of how nice he is. But he's 37, and I just don't trust his chin anymore. Not to mention that he's only won 2 out of his last 6 fights. Excuse me. And Neal probably hits harder than anybody since maybe Tyron Woodley. And he's definitely more technically sound than Tyron Woodley. So you didn't pick Neal to end it. So we will have dissension. I'm going to take I didn't pick Alex Morono, who's Fortis MMA. So I don't think the night will start good for Fortis MMA, but I think it's going to end in dream fashion. I'm going to take Neal. I'm going to say he knocks out Stephen Thompson in the second round.
And there you go. The Sherdog Radio preview and prediction show for UFC Fight Night 183, Thompson versus Neal. For a quick recap of the picks, in the prelims opener, Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Keith has Flick by second round submission. Ben has Flick by third round submission. Tafon and Nchukwi versus Jamie Pickett. Both of us have Nchukwi by first round knockout. Aiemann Zahabi versus Drako Rodriguez. Both of us have Rodriguez by decision. Deron Winn versus Antonio Arroyo. Ben has Arroyo by third round knockout. Keith has Arroyo by decision. Karl Roberson versus Dalcha Lungiambula. Ben has Roberson by second round knockout. So does Keith. Sijara Eubanks versus Pannie Kianzad. Keith has Eubanks by decision. Ben has Eubanks by decision. Anthony Pettis versus Alex Morono. Ben's upset special of the night is Morono by decision, where Keith has Pettis by second round knockout. Moving to the main card, Marcin Tybura versus Greg Hardy. Keith has Tybura by third round submission. Ben has Hardy by first round knockout. Gillian Robertson versus Taila Santos. Both of us have Santos by decision. Marlon Moraes versus Rob Font. Keith is going with Moraes by decision. Ben has Font by decision. Michel Pereira versus Chaos Williams. Ben has Williams by first round knockout. Keith has Pereira by decision. In the co-main event, Jose Aldo versus Marlon Vera. Keith has Aldo by decision. Ben has Vera by decision. And in your main event, Stephen Thompson versus Jeff Neal. Both of us have Neal. I have Neal by decision. Keith has Neal by second round knockout. That is the entire 13-fight card from UFC Vegas 17, the final UFC card of the year. Enjoy the fights, and make sure to check out the Sherdog Radio recap featuring Keith and myself after the fight.